Welcome to all our friends in Michigan Credit Union Leagues. We are introducing you to some of the best practices of how you can be more powerfully persuasive, how you can present to build your credibility and promote the image of your credit union. In case we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I am your host and your speech coach and trainer, Patricia Fripp. That was such thunderous applause, I can hear it all the way from Michigan. To better serve you, we have another part of our team. His name is Paul, and he will tell you how you can ask us questions and engage in polls. Take it away, Paul.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. On the right-hand side of your screen, you will see a chat box. Within that chat box, you'll be able to ask your short, specific questions throughout the call. In addition, we'll be having polling questions during the call. The polling question will pop up just above the text entry of the chat box. You'll select your option, click vote, and then return to the chat box. Thank you.
Naturally, we could spend 5 days talking about presentation skills. However, we want to make sure that we customize it for what is most helpful for you. So after a couple of introductory remarks, Paul will introduce the first poll. In case you're thinking, oh, Patricia, I'm not a public speaker. Remember, outside the privacy of your own home, all speaking is public speaking. There is no such thing as private speaking. And as we look at our everyday communications, if we can be clear, concise, personable, and specific, we will build our confidence and credibility and the confidence of our members and audiences. So, Paul, what's the first poll?
The first polling question is, do you consider yourself a novice, intermediate, or advanced speaker?
So just click on your answer. You see, it really doesn't matter if you are a novice speaker. You might as well learn the best techniques at the beginning of your journey. If you're an intermediate or advanced, by having new techniques and ideas and suggestions to look at the conversations and presentations you now have, it helps you be more excited and fall in love with your own message again. If you're excited about what you're saying and communicating, your audience is bound to. So what does our audience tell us, Paul?
Well, we have 50% novice and 50% or 33% novice and 67% intermediate.
Well, great. And I am sure if you take the few specifics to heart, that you will immediately go to the next level. And this is as you self-evaluate. I'm sure many of the intermediate presenters are probably closer to advanced. There are 3 ingredients that go into every type of conversation or presentation. It's the content, what it is you are actually going to say. Then there's the structure, how you organize your remarks. Consider your speech structure the skeleton under the flesh of your words. If you have a simple outline on paper, on a chart, in your mind, you will always remember. And you can hold the overview because we speak to be remembered and repeated. In other words, the clearer, more concise, more organized, and more visual we are, the more our audience of 1, 5, 50, or 500 can see our message. So there's the content, the structure, and then there's the delivery. When you have a simple structure, you know very clearly how you're going to open, how you're going to conclude. And if there were only 2 parts of a presentation you actually script, it would be the opening and the conclusion. You want to get off to a good start and close on a high. Then the delivery will take care of itself. So again, to look at your specific presentations, Paul, what's the next polling question?
The next polling question is, what size are your audiences? 1 to 10, 11 to 50, or 50 to 500?
And certainly what we would encourage you to do in the chat box is to write specific types of audiences or specific questions that you have that we can help you with. Because the advantage of this, you are talking to me even if you're not speaking out loud. And then, so Paul, do we have an answer yet?
It'll just be a few more moments. They would have just gotten it.
Okay, that's perfect. So the real secret of any communication to any size audience is emotional connection. I was interviewed by a well-known TV interviewer and game show host who is also a popular convention speaker. He was interviewing me for his blog, and after a 30-minute conversation, he said, Patricia, come on, tell me, what's the #1 secret of delivering a great speech? And I, of course, was saying, oh, there's no one secret. And then I realized that a brand new Frippicism was about to fall from my lips. Although there is no one secret, if there were, it would be that your subject is of interest to your audience. We speak as an audience advocate. And that means look at your content from the point of view of the person who listens. And imagine if the team, the audience, or the person you're talking to listens to what you say and on a regular basis is thinking, so what? Who cares? What's in it for me? Because at some level they are. And how we get over that is we use a good you versus I balance in a conversation. So rather than saying, the purpose of this meeting, Patricia, is for me to tell you blah, blah, blah. No, it's, Patricia, the purpose of this meeting is for you to better understand. So you see, it's always you focused. This works also with your emails and your communications. So if you quickly write an email, oh, I'm going to be sending this, I'll do that, and then rewrite the sentences with more of a you focus. It works in all types of communication. So you focused language. Also with an audience, or a small to large, you connect emotionally with eye contact. So if you're around a boardroom table, you might direct your attention to one person to deliver your opening line. However, you need to include everybody in equal eye contact. Think of it as a piece of the pie. And we all have a tendency to play to one side of the room more than others. Be aware of that so you focus yourself. Although I naturally go more to my left, the audience is right. I have to focus my attention on everyone equally. So Paul, what are the answers to the size of the audience?
Well, 67% say 1 to 10, and 33% say 11 to 50.
Paul, there is something with your sound when you first speak. It is not very good to hear. So I'm going to look 1 to 10, 67, 11 to 15. Okay, good. 11 to 50. Good. All right. And if you would please type in into the chat box your specific questions or help you need with a specific conversation or presentation. And if you can say 1 to 10 this, or your question for larger audiences, that. Good. So one of the 5 areas which will make your presentations and conversations more impactful are you-focused language. So the you-focused language, the emotional connection, the eye contact, and the third way you emotionally connect is with stories. Now, we all know in a keynote speech, stories make it come alive. in everyday conversation, stories and examples, and they don't have to be long, but help explain the complex. They help prove that in our credit union, we are not going to be as successful and serve our members as well as we can unless we do it together. It's great to use examples. And if you have any slight, subject that's a little complex, of course, if I see it and then you give me the steps, it's clear and wonderful. So there is no greater tool to develop in conversations, leading meetings, communicating your ideas, and delivering speeches than stories. Now, there are several ingredients that make your stories more compelling. Your stories and examples, they would follow a very simple formula that movies use. Most Hollywood movies, they follow this formula. A day in the life. You are introduced to your character. Something happens. That in a movie is the inciting incident, and the result of that is, and the result of that is, and the result of that is. The next area is think of stories are about people. And we need to see the people and understand the people. So, for example, if I was telling a story about a senior credit union executive, he dedicated his life to his credit union, his members for 13 years. Now, I know whatever happens to your character in the story, that this is someone who is experienced. So whatever decision they make, or perhaps whatever challenge they have, it's a universal message because your audience sees themselves through your own stories and examples. So you have characters, you have a change in the story, something happens that drives the story forward. And what makes it come alive is that we deliver the dialogue. We don't report on the dialogue. For example, in June, I was honored to be speaking for the Michigan Credit Union League, and that's where I met some of you. And one of the stories I talked about was my client, Bernard, who was talking about corporate citizenship. And his speech was getting a little boring. And I said, Bernard, how do you explain corporate citizenship to your children? He said, Patricia, it was the day after Christmas. And I sat my two children down and said, you are very generous children because, or you are very lucky children because you have generous parents and even more generous grandparents. And perhaps you would like to give us one of your gift certificates or one of your presents, and we take the money and give to children who no longer have homes. I was so proud of my 14-year-old boy. He came back to me the next day and said, Papa, how much do I give? Because I could give you all of my savings and all of my pocket money and all of my Christmas presents, and it still wouldn't be enough to make a difference. And Bernard said, oh, you don't give it all. You just give enough that it hurts a little. So you see, that story takes a minute to tell. And it is all dialogue. If you had that transcribed, 90% of it would actually be in quotation marks. That's what makes a story come alive. And that is what we mean by delivering the dialogue. And if you think you go to the coffee room at your credit union, and there's always somebody, you might consider them a street corner raconteur. They can tell you about what happened when they took their children to school that morning, and everyone is in tears of laughter. And then comes in some senior executive of finance who starts telling you, and then they suddenly realize we all have to go back to work. Some people are more natural storytellers. However, it is the best way to connect and explain. And practice, you see, as Michael Caine says, rehearsal is the work. Performance is the relaxation. And whatever you might deliver in a high pressure conversation or presentation, what you really do is just practice conversationally. Your eye contact, your you-focused language in your stories, practice at the dinner table with your family. So that is, we're going to certainly emotionally connect. That's one way. You're going to tell good stories. 3, you are going to have a simple, logical structure. And before we talk about that, let's hear the result of your polls. So, Paul, we do know the results were 67 and 1 to 10. Has anybody told us what types of audiences they have? And Paul, yes.
We have not heard that yet, no.
Well, then hopefully they are fascinated with the content, but feel free to, any specific question you have or advice you need with a specific presentation. So let's go on to your speech structure. This would work with an important conversation. It might be even if you report to a board, or if I don't know the makeup of our audience, but you have to report to your boss. You always think is, what is the big idea? Every presentation or conversation has a premise, a dominant theme, or a big idea. When I'm helping people design speeches, I always say, if you had one sentence rather than 45 minutes, what would you say? With Bernard, when I was coaching him for his leadership presentation, I said, Bernard, you got one sentence. What is it? He said, this is a brand new company. I said, great, that's your opening line. Write it down. Welcome to a brand new company. And that's your starting point. That is your big idea and your premise. And you always look at what is in it for this audience. So, for example, here is a very simple formula you might want to write down, and Paul will put it in the notes for you. And I'll give you an example from my own life. So, Paul, while you type, you'll need to put your microphone on. Good, thank you. We don't want to have any more distractions for you than we need. So think of this simple formula. It won't make sense at first, and then we'll fill it in. Every, can, subject of your talk, how, 1, 2, 3, 4. That is a simple premise formula. And you might find you give similar presentations to different audiences. So this is, sometimes you actually say the premise. I often do when I'm teaching presentations. I will say my presentation is every credit union professional can deliver even more impactful presentations. And then you'd think, well, how do I do that? 1, 2, 3, 4 is telling you how to do that. So, for example, every year I deliver a presentation for the American Payroll Association. The premise is selling yourself and your ideas to your senior management. So my premise very simply is every payroll manager can sell themselves and their ideas to their upper management. Oh, Patricia, how do I do that? 1, 2, 3, 4 is the structure of the presentation. So even with a complex subject, you still need a simple premise and a simple speech structure. So let's look at the premise, and this is how every Michigan Credit Union League professional can deliver even more powerful presentations. So 1, you already know. The first rule is that you are going to emotionally connect your audience. You are going to, and then to describe, to develop a chunk of content about that. You are going to look at the you versus I balance. You're going to make good eye contact, and you are going to deliver stories. And then the second point is stories. So how do you make your stories compelling? Very simply, you have characters with backstories, so we can understand who this character is, so we can emotionally connect to them because they might be like us or like somebody we work with or somebody we know. You might be telling a story about a member. Well, how long has that person been a member? Have they been a loyal member? How would you describe that? And then we need to know the beginning of the story, a day in the life, just like movies, and then something happens, which is why we're telling the story, and what happens after that. And you've also already learned that what you do is you deliver the dialogue to make the story come alive. Now, there are some other techniques in stories that we could always get to, but that's the basic. One quickie, and this comes from one of my friends who is, we collaborate on some events, and he is a story consultant for Will Smith's production company. And he always says, get to the scene late. And business communicators, we so often do too much setup rather than just getting to the action fast. So then our third way and our third talking point in your speech structure that proves the premise that Michigan Credit Union professionals can be even better presenters is speech structure. So your speech structure is built around a premise. So can you see how we're developing the chunks of content? So the speech structure, and then once we have the premise or the dominant theme, the talking points that of course that will make our case, then you look at how do you open with impact? The opening of a presentation is designed to get attention. So if this were a simple conversation, important conversation, it might simply be the purpose of this meeting is to. So it's getting to the point. Now you might have a few pleasantries, but have a real starting point for the conversation. If you're delivering a speech, you might open with a story. And as we have January in the very near future, no doubt we will all be having meetings of the State of the Union of last year, how the credit union, we're celebrating last year's success, and we are going on to what are our plans for this year, how are we going to do it. So you might start with a story. You could say, as we reflect on last year, many successes and memorable moments, one of my personal favorites was the time we. Now, you don't say, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, my name's Patricia, and I'm really excited to be here. No, start with the story and then say, what an exciting event to be together, to celebrate last year's successes and look forward to our goals, challenges, and opportunities for 2016. So can you see how it is? You start, then you transition into the body. You can always start with a question. Now, if you use questions, and frequently you'll hear, have you ever done something? Have you ever walked in a room of strangers and not known what to say or do? Well, if you say, have you ever? And it's only, that is giving the assumption that that was once, and you don't need a solution for something you lived through. So just changing that opening to, how often have you walked in a room of strangers and frozen? And whatever, yeah, you haven't known what to say or do. Well, welcome to how to network with impact. So you can see that would be ask a question. I also like a rhetorical question. If I were to ask you, is 2016 the year that you upgrade the quality of all your presentations and conversations? Perhaps you'd say no. Perhaps you'd say yes. Most likely you would say, Patricia, we would like it to be. Can you tell us how? Well, congratulations. You're at the right place at the right time, because not only will you learn 5 ways to improve your presentations, you understand the 3 aspects of every presentation. We will introduce you to a very fun, engaging way to learn to improve the quality of your presentations easily, conveniently, quickly, and very cost effectively. Can you see how it's done? Paul, do we have any questions or specifics before Fripp continues?
Not right now. I just want to remind everyone that to enter your question in the chat box, don't be shy. You don't have to wait until the end. Go ahead and put it in and we'll answer it as soon as you put that in there.
Because what we have always noticed, that people suddenly, when it's 5 minutes before we close, we have dozens of questions, and we want, we appreciate that some of our registrants are live and can do this. Others watch it as a replay, and however you attend, you get the replay button. So, and feel free to share that. It's not a problem. Share it with your friends if you think it's valuable. And we certainly is our goal to make this valuable for you. So now we're looking at speech structure. So you have, your opening, and you've heard a few options of openings. So there's questions, there's rhetorical questions, there's stories, there's a get to the point. This is this is the purpose of the meeting. There are other meetings that it might be appropriate if you're building relationships and perhaps you're talking to different groups who might want to be part of your credit union, where you might start with congratulations. Now, congratulations. Now, what is this entity proud of? See, the secret of really connecting, as you could see, this is emotional connection, but helping people understand, you know what they're proud of. That this isn't this is who I am, this is what I'm going to talk about. Nobody will ever be upset when you're talking about them. So congratulations is a great way. Now you could start a team meeting with congratulations. Your January, this is the State of the Union. Congratulations, what a great year. Then you might also start with a statement of opinion. For example, one I frequently use talking about presentations is, it never ceases to amaze me that intelligent, well-educated, and ambitious professionals frequently overlook developing the #1 skill that is absolutely guaranteed to position them ahead of the crowd. Namely, developing the ability to stand up and speak eloquently with confidence, or at very least, stagger to their feet and say anything at all. Perhaps it's because, as Jack Lemmon said, to speak in public takes the nerve of a bullfighter, the energy of a nightclub host, and the concentration of a Buddhist monk. You can start with an interesting statistic or little known fact. Now you can do this with the staff meeting. So you can even do this with an important conversation. The purpose of this meeting is to, let's start with a startling statistic. Now you can give it. And what you might also want in your back pocket, and these are emotionally connecting phrases. Would it interest you to know? Would it amaze you to know? Would it surprise you to know? Would it shock you to know? So you can do this, because whenever you start this way and the audience say, oh, would it surprise me? What? They're going to wake up and pay attention to what comes next, rather than just giving them the statistic. Now, when you are speaking to a group, that you introduce a statistic from their world that they don't know, they will be impressed that you know it. For example, I was booked to speak to 350 Seventh-day Adventist pastors. This was the fourth day of a conference. And 3 days are probably perfect for conferences. This was in Southern California, and most of the audience drove. I was the morning of the fourth day. So I knew if I don't grab this audience and keep them, they are probably at the coffee break going to be getting in the car and beating traffic home. And I wouldn't blame them if they weren't engaged. The subject was how to design and deliver charismatic sermons. And every audience is going to look at the program and they are going to ask themselves questions. Look, she's the only person on the program who isn't a minister. How can anyone who isn't a minister tell me how to write a better sermon? I write one every week. I bet she isn't even a Seventh-day Adventist, which I'm not. Even with a generous audience, you assume that they would think, well, somebody thinks she's got to be good or she wouldn't be on the program. However, the importance of proving your credibility at the beginning when they have an option of beating traffic home, an interesting statistic worked. And Seventh-day Adventist pastors are more biblical scholars than some denominations. I walked out and said, 465 times in the Bible,